going to jump right into John chapter 6. I'm going to read this scripture. We're going to basically stay here. We're going to feast, if you will, no pun intended, once we read the story on this particular passage of scripture. The title of this message is A Crowd of Cowards. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore, verse 1, of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover Festival was near. I want to explain something to you before we go to verse 5. The Bible specifically notates here that, guys, around the corner is the festival of the Jewish Passover. The Jewish Passover specifically is a symbol of, it's a symbol of a lot of things, but the main symbol of the Jewish Passover is the faithfulness of God. In other words, even when faced with death, like in the Passover, the faithfulness of God will never, ever let you down. I want you to understand that going into the story, that the author, and God, of course, through the author, wanted us to know that the time of year of celebrating and reminding ourselves of the faithfulness of God was literally right around the corner. Verse 5, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd, isn't that funny? We're thinking about the faithfulness of God, and then we see a great crowd. Isn't that the way it works? Where some of our greatest moments of breakthrough, or we think is going to be a breakthrough, or we think is going to be we're going to coast into Passover and eat lots of great food and have our dancing and be merry, and all of that stuff is going to happen. But before we get to that, there's this thing called COVID-19. There's this pandemic. There's these race riots. Our country is being torn apart by its seams. How many of us in the beginning of the year had all these prophecies? I believed God was going to do a certain thing in 2020. I need to go back and listen to it, and hopefully it's happening. But I don't think any of us saw any of this coming. And I want to encourage you through this story as we look at it, that what is on the other side is a reminder of the faithfulness of God. So although we are facing a hungry crowd in front of us and we don't know what to do, like we're going to see in this story, there is the faithfulness of God on the other side of it. Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Philip said. He asked this only Jesus said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, it would take more than a half year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. I want to tell you this, the cowards will always outnumber the people that live and are constantly living in a place of being reminded of the faithfulness of God. It is always, let me put this real kindly to you. It is always the coward's way out to try to make everything make sense. Because it lacks faith, it lacks risk, it lacks putting anything to the test. It lacks looking back and seeing, well, he's been faithful to us before, and we're getting ready to celebrate the faithfulness of God. And now he's asking me, hey, guys, disciples, you're supposed to be rolling with me. We got these hungry people. Where are you going to buy bread? Philip's answer here, it reminds me of a lot of what we're hearing today out there in the middle of the chaos that we're experiencing as a world, as a nation, as a city, as a county, in our neighborhoods. There's a lot of people with a lot of ideas, and everybody seems to be trying to tilt this one way or another for their benefit. And I believe in taking the necessary precautions. I do it myself personally. But I want to tell you this right now. We know that God's faithfulness is to the end. We know that God's faithfulness is with us. Philip answered him again in verse 7, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. How far will they go among so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. I love this because we are facing a time right now where most of us feel like there's never enough. And Jesus is a God where there's never not enough. Even in the small boy's lunch and in his loaves of bread and a couple of fish, there's always enough when you're rolling with the king. There's always enough when he is on your side. There's always enough when we are putting our eggs in his basket. And I love Andrew here because Andrew breaks through the crowd mentality. When there's a gunshot, what happens? Do people go and try to confront the gunman, or do they run? The crowd usually runs. It's always the one or two that actually want to confront the danger. When something happens, when a tornado is coming, there's times I remember this story. We were I'm not going to mention him, but he's my cousin. I have lots of cousins, so I won't mention his name. But I remember one time during 4th of July, I'm notorious for getting myself in trouble on 4th of July with fireworks and doing crazy things with them. This year, I burnt the tip of my nose. So if you go back in the last couple of services, you'll see there's a red blotch on my nose. It's from burning myself. I don't even know how. It looks like I've been drinking too much, but just the very, very tip of my nose. I mean, it's not pleasant. I literally burnt the skin off of it during 4th of July. But one year, my grandmother, who at the time I think was 97 or 98 years old, she passed about a month before her 100th birthday. So this had been about a year and a half before she passed. It was the 4th of July, and we were out at my house in Venice. We have a little pond out there. And my brother Jim and I were firing fireworks, and we had one of those artillery ones that shoot off 100 shots. They're called artillery, I forget, but they shoot off like 100 missiles. And we had it on an upside down boat that apparently wasn't even like a rowboat. And we lit it, and about 2 shots went off. And the thing tipped sideways with 98 shots to go, one for each year of my grandmother's life. That joke just hit me right now. And started firing in the direction of my 98-year-old grandmother and my entire family and the grandkids, my kids, my cousin's kids, etc., my siblings' children. And my cousin, of all people, instead of grabbing his children, he jumped behind a tree and left his kids with about 90 shots to go. My sister, because she is, she's a tough one, my sister tackled my grandmother to the ground and held her there. The truth of the matter is, our first instinct in difficult times and facing impossible situations is to really be a coward and run. We do that emotionally. We do that physically. We do that spiritually. The minute we're faced with what looks like an impossible situation, you and I, we run. They say fight or flight. Most of us are flight people. We do not want to confront it. We do not want to face it. We do not want to have to risk looking like an idiot in the face of a difficult situation. But I love Andrew because he cuts through all of this. And he says, listen, I don't know where we're going to buy enough bread to feed. In other words, I don't know how to answer your question, Jesus. And I think Jesus is asking you and I those questions right now. He's looking down from heaven and he's saying, hey, what you going to do? How are you going to pay the rent next month? What are you going to do 3 months from now if this continues and gets worse? What are you going to do with your kids going back to school? What are you going to do about, your grandmother and grandfather who are more susceptible to having challenges if they get this virus going around? What are you going to do? And some of us might be able to hear that from heaven and tune into what God is saying. But I don't think God's saying, hey, guys, it's your responsibility to come up with a solution. I believe God's actually saying, what do you have? What do you have? Because I can do everything with hardly anything. And Andrew says, listen, I don't know where we're going to get the food, get all the bread you're talking about, but here's a start. Why? Because Andrew knew. He knew that Jesus already had something in his mind. Do you and I really believe, like the scripture says, he asked the question, it was a test? But what does it say? Because he already had in mind what he was going to do. I want to speak this over you right now. He already has in mind what he's going to do. The question for you and I is, do you believe him? The question for you and I is, are we going to go the coward's way and say, hey, it's going to take a half a year to recover from this. It's going to take 10 years to recover from this personally. Are we going to take that way out? Or are we going to say, hey, I don't have it all, but I got something small. Got something little. It's insignificant. There's no such thing as insignificant in the kingdom. If you're willing to give it, he will take that which seems insignificant and do something significant with it. Whether it's time, prayers, money, your thoughts, your love for another person, helping your neighbor, whatever it may be, God can do great things with a little. Jesus says, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish, verse 12. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. I want to point this out to you. Andrew had made up his mind about the sufficiency of a faithful God. We can make a decision tonight on Wednesday night. We can make this decision right now on July 22nd, 2020, that the sufficiency of God is enough, that he is all sufficient, even in the middle of what is happening right now. We can pre-order, if you will. We can prearrange our mindset to make a decision right now. God is sufficient. Well, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I know that. And I don't even know what the solution is, but I know what the answer is. We need to realize that the removal or the void or the vacuum of a solution doesn't mean that we don't have faith in the answer. We know what the answer is. We just may not know what the current solution is. So we need to make a decision about the sufficiency of God. I want to point out 3 quick things, and then we're going to wrap up tonight. The first one is we need to lean in. We really need to lean in. We're going to go lean in, look down, and listen up. We need to lean in to the source, if you will, of our problem or our answer. If we really believe that he is the answer, even in the uncertain times, you need to lean into that. Apathy will always find an alibi. Apathy in where to look or what to do in the middle of all of this. In other words, deciding that you're not going to decide, that apathetic response to an opportunity for faith will always find an alibi for why you can't believe or trust God. You'll find a way out. You'll find a way to talk yourself out of it. Don't be apathetic. You're faced with an opportunity for faith. Place your faith in the God that we're getting ready to celebrate with Passover. That's what's happening in this story. God will sometimes push you towards what you want to push away. He will make you face the very thing oftentimes you're trying to push away. Why? Because some of us are hard-headed. And he wants to, in the most loving way, bring us to a point where we make a decision on the sufficiency of him. Why? Because he's trying to prove something? Because he's trying to make you be like, oh my gosh, I can do nothing without you. No. Because he doesn't want you to work so hard. He doesn't want you to worry. He doesn't want you to fret. He doesn't want you to bear the burden. And he knows if you allow your spirit to be kind of broken in that moment, to place your bets, if you will, on the sufficiency of him, and stop worrying, stop being anxious, and trust in the faithfulness of God. He knows that your life will be way happier, way more joyful, way more carefree. You'll be able to function, get more done, get more sleep, love better, have a much better time with the family and loved ones around you if you will allow him to push you towards the things that you and I want to push away. Our response to difficult things, circumstances, and people is a survival mechanism that oftentimes makes our own internal anxiety worse, not better. Our protection mode sometimes lands us in a worse spot than we started in, from the very worst place than what we were trying to protect ourselves from. The second thing I want to point out is we need to look down. We need to look up to God, and then we need to look down at our circumstances. In other words, we can't allow our circumstances to be bigger than the problem. I love this because Andrew looked up to heaven, or in this case, he looked to Jesus, which is looking up. And he's like, he's already got something in mind. He's just testing us. He just needs something to work with. And then he looked down and found that small boy. You see, if we can become convinced that God's up to something, even if it doesn't look like it, then it's amazing how we'll look down at the very places that seem to have no answers, or things that we thought couldn't even begin to help our problem. But once we hit here, we can look down and go, oh, here's a starting point right here. It's like when your house is a mess and you don't even know where to start, and then you start something small, and before you know it, boom, things are happening. The solution, the peace that you were looking for begins to fall into place. God's just asking you to take a step. Not because he's not willing to take care of it all for you. He's just asking you to take a step and look around and see what you got to work with. See what you're willing to put in his hands. I think the insignificance of that boy's lunch is there's a direct correlation to that and the greatness of Andrew's faith in a God who already had something in mind. Third thing is listen up. We need to look at the situation from the perspective of our source. We need to hear what he's saying about what's happening right now. Do you think God is caught off guard by a pandemic? Do you think God is caught off guard by racial tension or social injustice or the war that's being fought politically out there? Do you think he's caught off guard, or that he's up in heaven going, oh man, I've run out of answers. I don't even know how I'm going to begin to fix this or bring healing. We need to tune our ears in, stop listening to the cowards in the crowd. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, OAN network. I don't even care how conservative, far right, or far left, or in between they are. The reality is that our entire kind of source for news in media, I believe, is run by cowards. They are the cowards in the crowd. We can hear what they're saying and allow our worldview and our decisions to be made based on that. Or we can look at it and listen and watch and make decisions from the perspective of the source, the answer to everything that we're facing. We need to focus on that source in our situation. Stop. I like to put it this way. What are you listening to? Anyone ever gotten therapy or counseling before? I know I have. Probably need more. But I was with a counselor one day, and he said to me, he said, Dan, before you react emotionally to a situation, I want you to look at it from 5 different perspectives. So you're in a room with 3 people. Look at it from his perspective. Look at it from his perspective. Look at it from her perspective. Look at it from somebody from the outside looking in's perspective. Look at it from your own perspective. And if you still feel the same way, then react emotionally the way you feel. What I've learned from that is when we begin to look at it from other people's perspective, in the case of what we're facing, from heaven's perspective, our reaction, our action, our steps, our path forward will begin to morph and change to something that's much healthier and much based on the final answer and not the in-between journey and the worries of what tomorrow looks like. I want to encourage you with that tonight. I believe strongly that the story of feeding the 5,000 men, it would have been about 20,000 people, maybe 25,000 people altogether that Jesus fed that day, is truly a benchmark moment for you and I. It's a right now word. It's a rhema moment for you and I. If we'll look at that story and begin to trust in the faithfulness of God, a God who has been, is, and will be faithful, and who is the answer, even when the solution isn't presenting itself. We need to lean in. We need to look up to heaven and then look down again around us to what we can put in his hands. And we need to listen up to what he's saying. Look at our situation from his eyes and hear his voice for us during this time. Hope this encourages you. We'd love to see you Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll be out here for our drive-in service. You can drive in and fill up, as we say, at 10 a.m., live band. I'll be speaking. It's going to be a wonderful time, weather permitting, which we've only had one Sunday that's been rained out, I think, in the last 6 or 7 weeks. At 10 a.m., get here a little before 10 a.m. so we can get you parked. The earlier you come, the better parking spot you can get. You can listen on your FM radio, or you can hop out of your car, bring your mask and a lawn chair and join us under the trees. And we can just enjoy this open air service we've been having. It's been awesome. We'd love to see you. God bless you tonight.